Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Galambos. I work with the NIPTES group at MassDEP, and welcome to the walkthrough of the revised version of this facility guidance document for surface water discharge permits, requirements, and guidelines for PFAS testing. This document is a reiteration of existing requirements, so they're not new requirements. It also contains some helpful answers to frequently asked questions. The walkthrough today will explain the document. All technical info is already in the document. Hopefully this is a helpful resource to clarify any points of confusion. The document was put together in part as a response to the recommendations in the PFAS and POTW study that MassDEP funded, where we tested PFAS at all NIPTES POTWs across the state. It also has some things that we've learned along the way working with you all, just doing compliance testing for PFAS over the past few years. And if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to reach out to me. My email is on the screen. The document is available on mass.gov on the Testing of PFAS in Wastewater and Residuals webpage. It's linked here, and there's also a direct link to the document and the full URLs below. We'll jump to that webpage so we can see
Nicole,
where it is.
I'm not seeing anything right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you seeing the PowerPoint slide?
Perfect. Yep, I'm seeing that. Yep, on
Awesome.
the intro slide.
So here's where my email is. And again, this is the web page with the links, and I'll go over to the web page so that we can see where this document lives. All right, can you still see the right screen? Thanks, Kaylee. There's a few different documents here. What we want right now is the facility guidance for PFAS and wastewater. Okay. Here we go. Is this an all right size? Awesome, thanks. So again, this is an update to an existing document. It's been reorganized to hopefully be a little easier to navigate. There have been some requirements added, but again, these are not new requirements. These are requirements that have already been communicated, but maybe not included in the old version of this document. The document clarifies existing requirements that have been communicated either from DEP or EPA in emails, letters, or in permits. And it also offers some guidance to help with PFAS data quality. The first few sections have a recap of requirements, and then there's a section on guidance, and lastly, a set of links to external resources. There are generally two different ways to measure PFAS. One is to measure for specific compounds out of the thousands of PFAS compounds that exist, and the other is to measure PFAS in aggregate. The way that the NIPTES permits now require analyzing for specific compounds is through EPA method 1633. This is the most recent wastewater method. It can measure for 40 different PFAS compounds. And now all PFAS analysis required by MassDEP surface water discharge permits must be performed according to this method. In the past, there were different methods we're now all migrated towards EPA method 1633. And MassDEP no longer requires PFAS testing to be run by specific DEP approved labs for the surface water discharge program. Instead, everyone should be using this EPA method. Absorbable organic fluorine is an aggregate measure of PFAS, so it gives you one measurement to summarize all PFAS in the sample. And it measures organofluorine, so fluorine bonded to carbon. This is found in all PFAS. It's also found in some other compounds. Some surface water discharge permits require AOF testing, and for those permits, testing must be done using EPA method 1621. Data submissions is something that has been tricky, so I want to spend time on this. For BOTWs and holders of individual surface water discharge permits, such as industries, PFAS data must be submitted through EDEP with the lab report attached. The reason this is tricky is that it's separate from the EPA requirement in the NPDES permit to upload to NetDMR. So you will need to upload to NetDMR, your PFAS data to NetDMR to satisfy your NPDES permit, and also upload to EDEP to satisfy your MassDEP surface water discharge permit. Good news is that labs can typically perform this upload. It's easier for them to generate the file in the required format for our system. And if your lab hasn't done this work yet, you can have them reach out to us. We can help them. And there's also a mass.gov webpage with info on how to submit that data. This is a summary of PFAS requirements. Specific requirements will be in your permit. So for PFAS testing, the PFAS testing is required to use method 1633. Locations, compounds, and frequency vary by permit, so check your permit. This might, for example, look like testing influent, effluent, and sludge for 40 compounds quarterly. And again, submittal is through EDEP for POTWs and individual permit holders. Submittal requirements for other surface water discharge permits vary. For AOF testing, again, this is a summary. Specific requirements are in the permit. Not all surface water discharge permits require AOF monitoring. For those that do, they should be tested using EPA method 1621. Locations, frequency, and submittal requirements vary by permit. It might look like testing influent and effluent quarterly and then uploading to EDEP. Now we've moved from a summary of requirements to guidance. First, we have some link to some sampling procedures from MassDEP and from some other organizations that you can reference when creating your own SOP. Again, the sampling location, the general sampling location is outlined in your permit, such as influent, effluent, sludge, but specifically where you should take those samples from. The influent and effluent samples should be taken at the same location that you use for other compliance monitoring, and sludge should be from the final sludge product. So if you dewater or dry, you should sample the dewatered or dried product. If you pump and haul liquid sludge offsite, you should sample that final liquid sludge. We already talked about sampling frequency. Grab and composite samples. This is another thing that has been tricky. So the EPA test method, 1633, says that grab sampling is preferred to composite sampling. That's because PFAS can stick to things. So to do composite sampling properly, there are a lot of protocols and specific equipment that you need to use. So grab sampling is preferred. Some NIPDES permits have written in their composite sampling. However, EPA has since sent out letters for the small and medium POTW general permits, clarifying that grab sampling is preferred, and that grab sampling would satisfy your permit requirements. So if you have any further questions about that, please reach out. But in summary, the NIPDES permits are now aligned with the laboratory analytical method, saying that grab sampling is preferred to composite sampling. We have a few tips for when you write your chain of custody to make sure that the data is uploaded to EDEP correctly on the first try. So if you can include your NIPDES permit ID and method 1633, also indicate for each sample one of these four: influent, effluent, sludge, or industry. This is because these are the four options in the EDEP form. And if you write it in the line, the lab won't have to guess. We have seen labs do their best, but guess incorrectly, matching up what's in the chain of custody to one of these four options. In this case, industry is for indirect dischargers. For indirect dischargers, you should also include the industry name. So you might write industry dash and then the industry name. A reminder to upload to EDEP, and a request that J-flagged results are included. Blanks are not required by the permit, but it might be helpful to do a round of field blanks to verify that your sampling procedure isn't introducing any PFAS to the sample. Duplicates are also not required. The sample volume and number can be tricky. They vary based on your specific matrix and your lab. So the best thing to do is to reach out to your lab to determine the best sample size and sample number. For aqueous samples like influent and effluent, this is important because the lab is supposed to test the entire sample. So choosing the right sample size will better enable them to do that. You can help this by notifying your lab of your normal total suspended solids content. Multiple bottles are required for re-extraction if necessary to meet quality control standards. And also your lab may require a separate bottle to measure total suspended solids. For sludge samples, it's helpful to notify your lab of your typical total solids content to determine how much sludge they need, and they may also need a separate bottle to measure total solids. And the last thing that might be funky is if you know or suspect that your material might contain high PFAS, you may need a smaller sample size so that the lab can run the full volume of sample. So if you think that might be you, reach out to your lab. Note on total solids content of sludge: most sludge is run on a dry weight basis, so results in nanograms per gram. Some sludge with low total solids, for example, those with less than 2% total solids, are run as an aqueous sample by the lab. If this is you, please request that the lab also analyze and report total solids. This is helpful to compare aqueous versus regular sludge results that are in nanograms per gram. And also, I've seen a single facility with fairly low total solids have one result run in nanograms per gram and then another one in nanograms per liter. So that might also help you compare your own results across time. We talked about re-extraction when we talked about the sample size and number. Labs might need to perform an additional extraction if quality control specs are not met. So that's why the sample number is important. For resampling, if you end up taking additional samples, submit all of those results. J-flag data is data that's between the detection limit and the reporting limit, so it's an estimated value. And we're requesting that everybody report J-flag data and to include a qualifier when the data is uploaded. Most labs use a J-flag qualifier for this. And last thing, this is a note that can be tricky. For POTWs with indirect dischargers, you should note that the NPDES requirements vary slightly from the surface water discharge permit requirements. The NPDES permit requires testing for certain categories of users, like metal finishers, landfills, car washes. The complete list is in the permit. And the surface water discharge permit requires testing of significant industrial users. So there's some overlap, but also some indirect dischargers that will be different for each permit. Lastly, this is a summary of the links that have been throughout the document. Thanks very much.